What's up, everybody, and welcome back to THI. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. AJ here for another edition of our Daily Drop podcast series. Here to talk a little Carolina football and to pose the question to everybody, what would be considered a good start for North Carolina football this season? Now, AJ, you're going to explain in a second. We're not only going to talk about the start for Carolina, but we're going to kind of build off that a little bit and look on to the rest of the season as well. But real quickly, let everybody know how we're kind of separating the season and what we consider the start to the year. Because, I mean, again, you say start to the season, you're like, what are you talking? First 2 games, first 3 games? Talk about how we're basically splitting this schedule up.
Well, when you and I were talking about this a few minutes ago, I basically can't contain myself to just the first 4.
I thought first 5 until you brought up the bye week point, and I was like,
that's the thing. I think the season kind of breaks down into 3 parts. You got the first 4 that are non-conference games. Then there's an open date, Clemson at home, open date. Mm-hmm. I think that's the second part, especially the way it is. I mean, the whole UNC football is going to be sitting on that Clemson game for 3 weeks, basically, which is wild. And then there's the last 7. And what's really neat, if you're a Carolina fan and you don't travel to games or just you go to home games, there's going to be a stretch or 5 out of 6 Saturdays they don't play. Mm-hmm. Because after Central Florida, open, Clemson at home, open, at Cal on a Friday night,
yep.
Virginia at home, at Syracuse on a Friday night. Mm-hmm. So Carolina football fans who love just to sit back and watch the rest of the country, they love open dates. There you go. You're going to see a lot of the country this year. I like that. The problem is I'll be traveling back from Syracuse. Will be a pretty easy travel. Cal will be a terrible one. I'll miss half the college football Saturday. That's why I wanted that to be a Thursday game so badly.
I'm just saying, I'm going to let everybody know right now, apologize in advance for those people who maybe don't like when I do this. I'm going to put a tweet out. I like to tweet every, early in the week when the game starts, TV, what the spread is. The Cal week, I will put a big Y beside the 10:30 p.m. kickoff. I know why it's starting at 10:30 p.m., but the fact that I've got to stay up till 3 a.m., I'm still going to be a little frustrated about that. So I'm just letting everybody know a few months in advance, because that 10:30 is.
I'll sleep Saturday night.
At 10:30 is brutal, man. That's a brutal kickoff time right there. That's stuff.
And how important that game is will have a lot to do with the first 4, how they set up Clemson and how Clemson sets up the rest of the schedule, which is what we're going to dive into here.
Yeah, let's first of all answer the main question we're here to answer is what would be considered a good start for North Carolina. Again, we're going to focus on the first 4 games here. So TCU at home to open the season on a Monday night, at Charlotte, Richmond at home, and then a trip to Central Florida on September 20th. And that is the last game before the bye week. And then Carolina plays Clemson on October 4th. But we'll focus on those first 4 in particular, AJ. And it's an interesting question. I think if you throw Clemson into there and you focus on the first 5, it's even more of an interesting question of what will be considered a good record for the Tar Heels to start the year. Because, you did a drop a couple weeks ago talking about not only the importance of the TCU game, but how difficult of a game that more than likely will be. You've got a TCU program that was in a national championship game a couple years ago, coming off a 9-4 season. I think one of the best returning QBs in the country in Josh Hoover, nearly threw for 4,000 yards last year and 27 touchdowns. Not to mention, I've dug up a little bit on TCU, AJ, returning 3 starters on the O-line. They added 3 experienced transfers down there as well. And get this, 11 defensive players returning for the Horned Frogs this season. So by no means is this the pushover game for the Tar Heels, despite it being on Monday night, despite all the excitement with it being Belichick's first game. This is a game that Carolina, with all these new look players and this new look roster, I think is going to be a challenging game, no doubt about it. And then UCF as well, because you can look at Charlotte and Richmond and say, okay, no excuses. Carolina has to win those games. They need to win them relatively convincingly as well.
Yeah, I agree.
But the Central Florida game, too, I know it's a Central Florida game that hasn't, done well in the Big 12 since they moved there. But you've got Scott Frost coming back. He's the guy in 2017 who led them to the undefeated national championship season. Notice the hyphenated quotes in there.
They have that on the stadium, by the way.
AJ, I would milk it, too, if I was them. I have no problem with it. But to me, they're a little bit of a wild card team. I think there is a chance they could be pretty good. And I also think there's a chance that, especially in that conference, they could struggle. But the fact of the matter is the UCF game for them is their first big home game of the season. They do have 2 home games against some kind of, lower opponents before that, but that is their first primetime, big time matchup for Scott Frost 2.0. So Man, I look at this schedule and I say, I think you could sit here and I think my answer would be 3-1. I think that would be considered a good start to the season. Obviously, 4-0 would be a great start. I think 3-1 would be good, but I also think you could sit here, depending on how the games go, and say you could make a case for 2-2. I don't think I'm going to attempt to do it if Carolina was very competitive against TCU and very, very competitive against UCF. But my answer would be 3-1 would be considered a good start for North Carolina. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think anytime you do something like this, you have to add one element is like, how does 3-1 play out?
Yeah.
Like, what is the 3-1? Do they lose to TCU 42-7 and then blow the doors off the next three? Is it a narrow loss? They lose at the end and they screwed up and they can learn something. Is it a Belichick mistake? Welcome to college kind of thing. Is it stunned at Charlotte, but they beat TCU in Central Florida? How do you get the 3-1? I think 3-1 would be acceptable to most fans if they're very competitive and lose an interesting game, entertaining game to TCU in which the defense doesn't get shredded. I'm not talking 42-35. I'm talking 20-17. If they lose 20-17, I think fans would be a lot more optimistic than if they lose 42-35, because the one thing you've said it 1,000 times about the defense, seeing is believing. We did the Steve Belichick podcast. Seeing is believing, right? Mm-hmm. So if they see the defense hold Hoover to a modest performance, and it's like, okay, they just got to get the offense figured out, then I think people will be a lot more optimistic at 3-1. But if it's 42-35, 49-42, that kind of crap that we've seen way too many times at Kenan Stadium this century, I think fans are going to be like, well, geez, more of the same. And they're so close to falling off the ledge into apathy. That's the kind of thing that would push them there. They're very excited about Belichick, but this fan base has been so scorned so much that something like that would be like, geez, well, he's not going to win with this team. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you got, 2-2, Jacob. They got Clemson coming in. Suddenly you're 2-3.
I know.
With an open date, so you're 2-3. You have 2 wins going into the middle of October. I don't think that's going to go over too well. I think people are expecting a quicker fix. I don't think a 6-6 regular season like Mac had in 19 is going to be treated the same way, because Mac was coming off 5 wins in 2 years. 2 of them were against FCS teams. One was at Old Dominion, which was transitioning into FBS. So it was like 2.5. They beat Pitt twice for some reason. They used to own Pitt for a while.
Yeah, they did.
So Mac showed significant progress, but that kind of season here is just a repeat of last year, just with different guys in a lot of ways. I think people are expecting a quick fix. They got a 73-year-old legend. He didn't come around to build this thing for 10 years. Came around to win now. So 3-1 at the minimum. I don't think 2-2 is acceptable, even if they lose on 60-yard field goals in both games.
Yeah,
I think they've got to go 3-1 at the minimum. And quite frankly, if they want to make the Clemson game special, building up and get a lot of national hype, they're going to get national attention. Do they want a lot of hype? 4-0.
Well, just to have a little fun with it, let's throw the Clemson game in there. So let's. I know there's a bye week after, I get that, but let's throw the Clemson game in there. So the first 5 games this season at home against Clemson, throw in the mix, because when I was kind of thinking of topics today, I was thinking of approaching this podcast from that, because I think the question becomes even more interesting, because my answer to the first 5 was, I think I could sit here and make a legitimate case. And I think a lot of Carolina fans would agree. Let me know in the comments that a 3-2 start in the first 5 would be considered still a pretty good start for North Carolina. Again, you have to beat Charlotte. You have to beat Richmond. You need to beat those teams handily. I know it kind of looks like, okay, but now you're looking at TCU, UCF, and Clemson, and you're only winning 1 out of those 3. I think the caveat I'll say there is, this is a new look roster. We've talked about the sheer amount of roster turnover here. Anybody that's trying to sit here and predict how good or bad this Carolina team is going to be this year, I think it generally has no clue, because the fact of the matter is this, AJ, roster turnover that I mentioned, completely new staff. No one knows really what the quarterback position is going to look like. Heck, I like a lot of what Steve Belichick did at Washington, did in the NFL, but can he come in and have this immediate successful defensive turnaround? Maybe it's easier because of all the new faces on that side, but maybe it's even more difficult because of all the new faces on that side and having to gel, especially early in the year. So just to ask the question, would you could you make a case that 3-2 would be a good start in the first 5 games? Are you kind of looking at it, taking the same vantage point that you just said about the first 4 and say, man, I think 4-1 would actually be considered a good start? Because I think you can make strong cases for that.
I agree with you on that. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they should go 4-0.
No, I know.
I'm not saying that they will go 4-0. I'm just saying that you bring Belichick in, you invest the way they have, you want pretty quick payoff here. Mm-hmm. And it's not like TCU is Alabama coming in.
No.
So, but it's a good team. It's a team, I think, someone said on one of our YouTube threads that Carolina's, that TCU's favored in that game, whatever. I agree with you 3-2, because especially if you're 3-2 and you've already taken on TCU at Central Florida and played Clemson, the rest of the schedule is very manageable. You get a lot of time to heal after Clemson. And then you're talking about at Cal, Virginia, at Syracuse. Syracuse, we don't know if they're going to be the same team they were a year ago in year 1 under Fran Brown. Stanford's in a wild situation. We're firing their coach in the spring. Wake Forest with a new coach. I don't think there's a whole lot there. Duke at home. Carolina should beat Duke at home, although Duke's a pretty good team. And then at NC State, try to get the hex. If they could be 9-2 going into NC State, or even 8-3, I think they have a chance to. I think 9-3 would be a really good year for this team. So I agree with you about the 3-2 and how that projects. But here's the thing. The reason Clemson's a second phase to a 3 phases to the schedule for me is because September 20th, they play Central Florida. Between September 20th and October 17th, they play 1 game. That's Clemson at home. Mm-hmm. So it's 2 weeks before and then 2 weeks after. And there's going to be so much made of that. Mm-hmm. Leading up to it, are they up to the task? Afterward, why weren't they up to the task if they lose? Or if they win, people are going to be building a statue and penciling them in for the CFP and all that kind of crap. So much is going to be made of that because of the way it's situated in the schedule. Mm-hmm. And then they got a mad dash to the end, 7 weeks. Two Friday road games, and they got 1, 2, 3 home games. Virginia, Stanford, and Duke.
Yeah, the schedule. Yeah, there is no 2 consecutive home game stretch. I think we talked about that when we did the schedule release. I mean, it is a little bit interesting. You're kind of used to that happening, especially at least early in the year, where you maybe play a couple gimmies, and maybe it would set up like that. But Carolina going to Charlotte kind of throws the spanner in there, which means no back-to-back home games on the schedule for North Carolina. But you make a great point about that Clemson game. Yeah, with the bye week before and after, because you are right. If Carolina wins that game, let's say Carolina's 4-1. Let's say they beat TCU, or let's say maybe they lose the opener and then they win 3 in a row and they beat Clemson. So they're 4-1 going into the Cal game. I mean, the 2 weeks after, if you beat Clemson in that situation, the 2 weeks after, all the storylines are going to be like, well, what is Bill Belichick cooking in Chapel Hill? Because people are also going to be looking ahead to the rest of the schedule and saying, well, you got a trip to Cal and you play Virginia at home. You're going to be looking at it and saying, this team's 4-1, having beaten some good teams. I mean, they could easily make a run in these last 7 games, and who knows what could happen. So, that Clemson game, it feels like that one. If you're circling any on the schedule right now, it feels like if you can get to that Clemson game in good shape, man, does that set up as just a big matchup for what the rest of the season could do, and maybe also sets up for the bigger, outlook at the Bill Belichick era, however long that may be. We talked about it the first year with Mac. I mean, it barely lost to Clemson at home in that game. And I mean, who knows how differently, I'm not saying the Mac Brown tenure goes any differently if they beat Clemson, but just the vibe around the program in year 1 and maybe even moving on to year 2 and year 3 would have been different if you had that Clemson win under your belt. So that sets up as a massive test, game. Jacob.
It's a bit of a litmus test, but here's the thing. Even if they lose Clemson, if they win the rest of their ACC games, they're going to play Clemson again, probably.
It's a good point, yeah.
So I think best case scenario, if they want to make the CFP, let's say, God, I shouldn't even be talking about this. This is ridiculous. That's like saying, when I win the lottery, I'm going to buy a house with a big pool.
Hypothetical, very big hypothetical.
Massive hypothetical. My point is that if you want to look at things that way, you kind of got to beat a good team outside your league. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To show league strength. So you're better off beating TCU. If you're going to lose one and losing to Clemson, you get a crack at them again, and they're still Clemson. But at least if TCU has a good year in the Big 12, at least you can point to that Say, well, we got that one. If you lose to them and then win the league, people are going to be like, well, the ACC is not very good. So it's a lot of it is the perception thing, but we're not doing CFP stuff here at all. But some people look at things that way. Yeah. And quite frankly, if they were to roll through the last 7, they would situate themselves at least to be talked about a lot, depending on how those first couple go. I'm going to partition 3 ways. The first 4, I agree with you that I think 3-1 is fair. If they're 3-1 and they don't get blown out and it's very competitive and they don't do a lot of stupid stuff and they just lose because they're kind of not ready yet, I can deal with that. I think that would be okay. 2-2, I'd have a problem with that because they shouldn't lose to Central Florida. Mm-hmm. And they shouldn't lose any of those other 2. I think 3-2 after Clemson, again, is fine, especially if you don't get rolled by Clemson, because those last 7 are really going to determine your season.
Yeah.
Because they're all winnable. At Syracuse looks tough right now because of what the Q's was a year ago, but they don't have the same quarterback. Mm-hmm. And we don't know. They lost some good players, man. They lost a lot of offensive skill from that team. We don't know what they're going to be. Maybe Cal's really good, but Cal's in kind of a weird situation where Justin Wilcox has to report to Ron Rivera.
Yeah, it's getting weird over there. Isn't it?
Yeah, Stanford's in a really bizarre situation. Frank Reich's the coach there.
I know.
It's weird. Wake Forest, we don't know what's going to happen there. Wake Forest has been extremely fortunate that its 2 best coaches ever were back-to-back in Grobe and Clawson. How, can they strike oil a 3rd straight time? But before that, Wake was arguably the worst FBS or power conference program in the country historically. Duke, I think Manny does a solid job at Duke. Duke's could come in. They're going to be physical and all that. Carolina has to play a solid game to win. And then going NC State, that's going to be the toughest of those last 7 because the Wolfpack at the very minimum is going to be solid. Mm-hmm. And that night, they're going to be more than solid. It'll be a difficult task for Carolina because it always is a difficult task for Carolina.
It's fascinating, man, because the more I look at this schedule and just because of the question marks I have about Carolina, just sheerly because of the completely new staff, completely new revamped football, program and just the roster turnover. The more you look at the schedule, you're like, you kind of go back and forth. You look like, again, I look at that UCF game and I say, I agree they should beat UCF, but Scott Frost 2.0, first big game of the Scott Frost 2.0 era at home. What is Carolina like early in the season? Like, what does their progression look like? Like, are they kind of fat and happy looking at 3-0 and then have to go, play maybe a primetime matchup with UCF on a Saturday night? Like, the more you look at it, you can just sit here and analyze it because of all these unknowns. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of unknowns with this team. So,
and in North Carolina football this century loses games like that.
And again, let's not forget that.
And the other thing, too, is if they beat TCU, you could almost rest assured UCF is going to be primetime on Fox.
Exactly. Because
if they beat TCU and if they look really good doing it and they handle the next 2 weeks like they should, the whole country is going to be talking about Belichick. And Fox is going to want to capitalize on that. So it's going to be a primetime game.
Fascinating, man.
And the bounce house is going to be liquored up and wild.
I know. That's why I think that game, you at UCF and Clemson, just looking, the more I hone in on kind of that 2-game stretch, despite the bye weeks before and after the Clemson game, it's like, man, based on what Carolina football has been in the last 15, 20 years, AJ, a lot of fans, you'd be looking at that and be like, man, you could easily lose those 2. I don't think Carolina will, but you could easily, if Carolina loses to UCF and Clemson, I'm personally not going to be sitting there and being shocked. Let's put it that way.
I agree. I think 2-3 is realistic, and it doesn't mean the end of the world. And I know that's a little contradiction to what I said before, but in a way it's not. I'm looking at it in a couple of ways. One, what are you paying for? Mm-hmm. You're paying to win right away. And this kind of scheduled those first 4. We should 3-1. And really, you should be TCU. If you're North Carolina and you've got the greatest coach of all time who's now in college and all the money that's been spent and the roster makeover, and there's a lot of skill on offense. There's a lot of experience in the offensive line. There's a lot more dudes on defense, I think, that a lot of us realize yet because nobody's seen them in Carolina uniforms. But there's some guys over there, and they don't have to be great to beat TCU. They have to be pretty good at home. You should be able to beat TCU, I think. And I think TCU is a pretty good team. But at Central Florida is a very dangerous situation. So even if they are 2-3, they still have a chance to close out 6-1 and go 8-4, something like that. And I think a lot of Carolina fans would be, if they know that Belichick's coming back, because a lot of them are still skeptical about that. they would look at it and say, okay, well, Gio Lopez is back. Bryce Baker will be in his second year, so have some competition there. And a lot of guys are still in the program because a lot of the players they brought in have multiple years. They might look at that and say, okay, 8-4 is a stepping stone to whatever 2026 is going to be, where they start the year in Ireland and another year to have tremendous amount of national attention. So I think a lot of people would look at 2 and 3 with a longer view and say this could be okay as long as they close well. Or if you lose to TCU and you lose to Central Florida and you lose to Clemson, it tells me you don't have the horses to win those games.
Yeah.
So then maybe you lose at Syracuse, you lose at Cal, you lose at State, and suddenly you're staring at 6-6, 5-7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said it on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. We were talking. I think I asked somebody what a good record would be, and there was a lot of responses. But I responded to somebody and I said, honestly, I think if a lot of Carolina football fans, diehards, are being honest with themselves, I think if someone said, "Hey, before the season starts, 8-4," I think a lot of people would take it. And again, the context has to be there. It depends who you lose to and depends who you beat. But in year one under Belichick, if for sure you know he's coming back, I think that's the key. I don't think any Carolina fan at the end of the year is going to be pissed off about 8-4. Let's put it that way.
And they got to win a bowl game.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know.
They got to win a bowl game. They won one bowl game since Switzer's freshman year.
We were at the last bowl game they won, AJ, up in Annapolis. I mean, that feels like an eternity ago.
And when they beat Cincinnati, they were in Conference USA or the Big East or whatever. It was Big East or Conference? Yeah, they were Big East.
I was at that game.
So they haven't won a bowl game over a team in a power conference that still exists. The Big East is gone since. And Cincinnati had just gotten into the Big East from Conference USA. When was the last one? Okay, let's see. Tennessee.
Yeah, that was TJ Yates. Yeah. God, I remember where I was. I remember where I was when I was watching that game on TV. I'll never forget that.
They won that game and a rule changed. Yeah.
Had to change the rule in that one. Yeah. God, yeah, it's crazy. It does speak to win a bowl game, Belly. If you do anything in year one, just win a bowl game. You know, I'm tongue in cheek, but make sure you win that bowl game.
Yeah, I want to know what people think about this first 4. I'm very curious what people also think about the isolation of the Clemson game. Mm-hmm. September 20th to October 17th, they play once, and it's Clemson at home.
I know.
See, that thing could define so much because it's thrust in your lap for 2 weeks beforehand, and it hangs out. The residue stays for 2 weeks after, no matter how the game plays out.
Yeah, it could go either way. And sometimes having a bye week that early in the season, I mean, you think it's great, but sometimes it doesn't help you. Sometimes you kind of get in that rhythm through 4 games. You just kind of want to keep playing for a couple more weeks. So, I mean, who knows? While it looks like a kind of a gift, and I think in a lot of ways it is, it also, depending on how you handle it, maybe it isn't. Maybe it kind of, you feel like you're on a nice roll, and then you're off for,
I've talked to coaches. I've talked to head college football coaches in different programs who don't like having bye weeks before a huge home game because there's way too much put into it. And, Mac, one of the things, Mac talked a good game, said a lot of really intelligent things. You learn a lot. Football fans can learn a lot about how some coaches think because Mac told us a lot of stuff at times. One of the things I used to like that he said is, look, you don't want to play the game emotionally on Tuesday or Wednesday. And if they're 4-0, they could be playing that Clemson game for a week before they even get into Clemson week. And Clemson's preparing for somebody else. I guess they have a game that week. So I do think that could work against it. It could help you get healthy because they're going to have August practice and then 4 games. So they're going to be going for basically 2 months, and then you get a little bit of a break. I do like the timing of that as an open date if you're going to have one. But the cruelty of the second open date, no matter how that game plays out, that's going to be a task Belichick hasn't had to deal with before because pro guys are kind of like, okay, let's get on this even plane and stay there. Mm-hmm. College guys are a little bit more like that. Yeah. So that's going to be fascinating how it all plays out. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see what this club is. I can't wait to see how they handle stuff. I can't wait to see what Belichick says about screw-ups and about really successful things. I'm looking forward to seeing Gio throw the ball. I'm looking forward to seeing Davion Goss. I'm looking forward to seeing Andrew Simpson and Thad Dixon.
Not Thad Lewis.
I want to call him Thaddeus. I'm looking forward to all of it, man. I'm excited. And I'm excited for Carolina fans that I've been reporting to in various capacities for almost 30 years now, that they have something that they believe could work out and be special. Or it may be a flop, but at least there's a lot of hope and optimism. And that excites me too, because there are a lot of good people who root for Carolina football and put a lot into it and care as much about it as they do basketball. And I think it's time they get rewarded. They've had a couple of little bouts of being rewarded, like in 15 and 20. Butch's team in 2010 could have been one of those clubs, but all hell broke loose and they weren't. So I think a lot of those people deserve it too.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, optimism is a beautiful thing. And I think a lot of Carolina fans are going to be and should be optimistic during the season. But I think there's also, like we've talked about, and I say a lot because my family's had season tickets for 15 years. I'm going to Carolina games for my whole life, essentially. Like I know what the product that Carolina football has delivered in the last 20, 25 years. So I think there's also a lot of people out there like probably like cautiously optimistic, but also a little bit nervous because I think they really believe and want this thing to work under Bill Belichick. But there's a lot of people sitting back that they've been scarred so many times. They're like, man, I hope and pray this thing works out. But if it doesn't, I'm not going to be sitting there shocked. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting place to be for sure.
Selfishly, last thing I'll say before we went so much longer than we thought we were going.
Yeah, shocker, right?
Selfishly, I want to cover really important. I've covered so many important college basketball games. I can't keep track of them all. I'd like to cover some really important football games too.
God, yeah, you're not lying about that. It'd be awesome to do that. So,
because even when I covered the Panthers, that was the beginning of the Cam Newton era. So yeah, they were important, but it was all about Cam's development. How are they going to build around Cam? And when I did cover some really important hockey games with the Hurricanes when they won the Stanley Cup. But then when I was on them a lot, when I was at Fox, they were mediocre.
Yeah, the football is the one you want to cover some. It'd be nice to cover an important game in football, and I need to cover like an Orange Bowl. That was cool, but like important games. Let's say not just
Miami when they ran for 11 million yards. That was an important game.
That was fantastic.
But it was weird because it was COVID, so only a certain amount of people were allowed in the stands.
Yeah, it's a shame it worked out that year, but yeah, man, it's going to be a fascinating year, and I want this comment section to be fascinating as well, and I want it to be active because I want to know what you guys think. What would you consider a acceptable or good start for North Carolina? If you want to do the first 4, if you want to do the first 5 and throw the Clemson game in there, that's fine. If you want to say, hey, this is what I think would be an acceptable overall record for Carolina too, we'd love to hear from you guys. But I want this comment section to be active because I think this is a very interesting question that's going to have a lot of differing opinions. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. We will have an announcement coming soon about the future of THI, formerly known as Tar Heel Illustrated. Just keep it locked with us. I'm trying my best not to say that at the beginning of every video because people are probably getting tired of hearing it.
Yeah, a couple of them said some stuff. And I do look at the comment. We don't have a message board right now, except we have Facebook and we have the YouTube comments. So I like to engage. But yeah, we can't. We will soon. The clock's ticking. We're getting closer. The ship is getting close to the shore.
Yeah, I promise we're not just saying that to say it. There is something in the works, and we will announce it when we are able to. But appreciate everybody watching as they always do and sticking with us in this time of transition, but exciting time ahead for us and really looking forward to it. And it starts with the football season on September 1st, and I should say August 1st when practice starts. So, all right, guys, I've been Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. See y'all next time. Thanks.
Thanks.